Hey guys, welcome back to A Story with Rory. I'm your host, and tonight we have a very special guest on. His name is Randy Harrington, and he's from the USA. And he's got a pretty cool story. So, how's it going, Randy?
It's good, Rory. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, I guess go ahead and tell us what story you have tonight, and start from the beginning and tell us when and where it happened, and go from there.
Well, there's no way I'm going to be able to go through all of the details, but it happened in 2005. It was February. I was in the Chickasaw National Park, which is a park just south of Sulphur, Oklahoma. And the reason I was there is because I had a friend who lived in a town north of there, Paul's Valley, and he had a Bigfoot encounter in that park system.
Hmm.
So since then, I've learned a lot of people have had Bigfoot encounters in that park system. So, prior to that, I only had my friend Keith, his story, and it was specifically based around a campsite, which was number campsite 30, which runs alongside Rock Creek. Now, this whole park is filled up with different campsites and spring-fed creeks. The town that is just north of there is called Sulphur, and the reason it's sulfur is because of the sulfur smell that comes from those springs. So it's a good sized park with some lakes and lots of cold water creeks fed with springs. So typical Bigfoot terrain. You know, I think a lot of the Bigfoot stories originate around spring-fed creeks. I know if I was living in the wild, I'd prefer to drink the nice, clean, clear water in a creek rather than dirty, stagnant pond water.
Right.
Uh, so needless to say, that's how it originated. And so because of my friend in Paul's Valley, I went in there one night and stayed at campsite 30, and I set myself up to hopefully see something, and it turned out to be the most incredible sighting that I've had so far. It was the night there at the park. It involved two of these creatures. I mean, I'm calling them creatures, but they're more human type than they are creatures. But at the time, I didn't know what I know now. I mean, now I've had 20 plus years of interactions with these things, so I have a better understanding now of what they are rather than then. Back then, I could only go with what they look like.
Oh
And
wow.
when I saw that big one, it looked like an ape. It looked like an ape to me. So in my mind, that's what it was. Uh,
Right.
but it started out where I taped up blankets on the inside of the cab of my truck. I was the only one in this campsite. There was at least 125 campsites, primitive campsites meandering along this creek and separated by patches of woods and little gravel trails that connected all of the campsites, and gravel trails that you go to the restrooms and things like that. So that's the kind of campground it looked like.
Hmm.
And so I taped blankets up on the inside of the cab of my truck, uh, so that if something came and looked at my truck, they wouldn't be able to see me inside the cab of the truck, because I was going to stay awake all night. And I had a headset with a parabolic mic on the top of my truck so I could hear what was going on.
Oh,
And,
nice.
and so I would turn the parabolic up and I could hear really well anything that was going on. And I was the only one there. Nobody was there. It's the off season. It was in February. It was
Hmm.
a very cool night, very, very chilly, maybe even in the 30s. It was quite chilly, and there wasn't even a camp host. So I was truly alone.
Right.
And at the time, the park had the kind of trash cans that are metal with the lids on the top, and then they'd have a short chain that would have had a cinder block to keep the lids on so raccoons don't get into them. So that's the type of gravel roads, uh, very isolated campsites with wood surrounding each one of them, and trash cans that were generic metal trash cans. So it was
Right.
an older type camping situation. So I'm in there, and remember, I was told by another gentleman who had seen a young juvenile Bigfoot from that same campsite. My friend from Paul's Valley. That's why I was there. So he said there was a big one in the park, and then there was this little one, and and indeed, that's what I eventually saw. A large male and about a 5 foot, 5.5 foot tall juvenile.
Man.
But it started out with I'm in my truck. I never even got out of my truck. What I did was I came in right before dark and I set up a tent and a table and some other things. And then I went to town to get me something to eat. And so when I came back at the very front of the park, I taped all the blankets up inside my cab. And then I just kind of tootled my way through the park, which is a one-way meandering path to get to your campsite. Right. So when I got to my campsite, I just closed the blanket and I'm sitting in my truck. I never opened my door or anything because you never know when you're being watched. So that was my plan. My plan was to do things that way. So I'm kicked back in my seat. I eat my food that I got from Sonic, and I'm sitting in my driver's seat with the seat kicked back, and I've got a headset on because my parabolic was on top with the cord running through the door. So I could hear very clearly just all the nighttime ambient sounds. I could actually hear traffic in the town that we were south of. So I could hear occasional traffic sounds from that town. So that's how well a parabolic works. So I'm in the park just sitting there, and I'd say it was a couple hours. So maybe it's like 10 o'clock at night or give or take.
Mm-hmm.
I started hearing footsteps. I heard some walking. And so I started paying attention because up to that point, I'd been sitting there for 2 hours just relaxing and only listening to the nighttime sounds, the wind blowing through the trees and the rustle of leaves and things like that. Nothing out of the ordinary. And then all of a sudden, I'm hearing footsteps walking through, crunching the leaves as they take steps. And so I start paying attention. And then I hear what sounds like a stick being dragged through gravel. And so whatever was walking was dragging a stick, and you could hear it drag through gravel, and then it would go back into the leaf litter, and then I would hear the footsteps through the leaves. And only occasionally would I hear a stick dragging through gravel, because what I learned later is there's just gravel paths all over the place. So every time it would pass one of these gravel paths, it was still dragging the stick. So at some point I hear a trash can lid being manipulated, like pop open, and then I hear it put back on top, and so I'm thinking to myself, okay, something is getting into the trash cans. Now at that point, it could be a person, it could be a homeless person, it could be anything. But the thing is, it was the off season at the campground. Nobody's camping. There's not even a camp host. So if there was a homeless person from that town in there looking for food in those trash cans, wouldn't they be smart enough to know that there's no food there if it's in the off season and nobody's camping?
Right.
So whatever was going through the park was going from trash can to trash can. At the time, I didn't know where the trash cans were located because I'd never been in the park before other than that one campsite, went to get something to eat, and then I came back. So I didn't have much knowledge about the whole layout of the park until after all this happened. Right. But so it was going through the park, and it was lifting up trash can lids and putting the lids back on. And then I heard what sounded like metal, something hitting a metal, like a ping, and then walking, dragging the stick, walking, and then another ping. And so after about the third time I heard it hit a metal thing, I realized that something was hitting lantern posts. Each campsite has a lantern post.
Yeah.
So something was walking through the park, lollygagging like a kid, dragging a stick, hitting lantern posts, and checking out trash can lids, which comes to find out when I get to the end of my story, that may be the case. It may be the little one that was going through the park, meandering through the park like a young human child would do, not caring that he was making any noise, because I don't think they expected anyone to be in the campsite like I was.
Right.
So I'm listening to this and I'm having to put the picture in my head of what I'm hearing. At that point, I am 100% sure that it's at least a person that I hear going through the park doing whatever they're doing. So I start paying attention, and I look behind me in the side mirror of my truck. I could actually open my blankets at the corner of my driver's seat and look in the side mirror so I could look down and see behind my truck. And I was in a crew cab diesel F-250 with ladder racks on the back. So it was a good sized truck. And the Fords have big side mirrors. So I had a good clear view behind me. So I kept watching the space behind my truck. And sure enough, eventually I heard the footsteps that I had been hearing constantly for at least probably 45 minutes to an hour going through the park. It's a big park.
Mm-hmm.
I heard them stop for the first time. And when I heard them stop, I thought to myself, it sees my truck. It sees my campsite.
Yep.
And then I hear it move a little bit and stop. Then I hear it move a little bit and stop. And I thought to myself, I'm pretty accurate to what I think I was hearing. And I said, it is now stalking my campsite. It sees my campsite. It must be trying to maneuver to see into my campsite. So then I started watching in earnest behind my truck. There was a wood line behind my truck that I was keeping my eye on the wood line. And sure enough, I saw some shadowy movement back there. And so I was focusing on that spot. And there was a tree. I saw this figure put both hands on side of the tree and step out around the tree and look at the back side of my truck and then duck back behind the tree. Mm-hmm. That's the first time I saw it. And at that point, it could still be a human because it had a human form to it. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know a size reference. I didn't know anything. So then I hear a wood knock where it hits the tree. Mm-hmm. So up to that point, all of those knocks that I had heard throughout the park, it was only hitting the metal post. So when it hits the tree, about 30 or 40 yards behind where the figure was in the woods, there was the creek, was Rock Creek. I hear something splashing across Rock Creek. So a second one came across and joined him. But the thing is, the second one did not come across any time that he ever hit one of the metal posts. He only came over when he hit the tree. And he never hit another tree before or after that. So that tells me they had a pre-communication of, if you need me, if you see something interesting, hit a tree and I'll come over, because that's what happened.
Right.
So I knew where they were because I'd seen him look around the tree, and I heard the tree hit. So I knew about where he was. So that's where I was focusing my attention, watching in my side mirror. I could see that whole area that had a little walking trail behind those row of trees. So they were behind that. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing that happened is it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around, but it is what it is. I started hearing hoots like an owl, and it was loud. It hooted. I think I counted 17 times every 5 seconds. Hoo! Real loud for like 17 times in a row with only 5 seconds between each one of them, and they seem to be getting louder each time. So I've got a recording of those hoots, and you can actually, if you watch my YouTube video, I've got those so you can listen to them.
Okay.
But we've had people with spectrograms look at these, and when I told them, I said, is there any way you can check these for volume, because I thought they were getting louder each time. And so either that, if it was an owl, then the owl was moving for it to get so much louder each time. So that didn't make any sense to me, that an owl would be making sounds and then moving closer each time. So after the 17th hoot, there was no more hoots, and they broke free from the wood line. It's almost like they did that to see if there would be they could stir up any movement in my campsite. Mm-hmm. And when they didn't, that's when they felt okay to come out, because at that moment, both of them came out of the wood line, and that's when I saw what I saw, because I watched the whole approach. They came out in full view of my side mirror, and the big one was stooped over and they were moving pretty quick to get to the back corner of my truck. The little one was just flanking him on his right and was actually bumping into his hip. I saw them both bumping in as they were both trying to get to the same place at the truck at the same time as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And the big one was kind of stooped over with his arms swinging like a gorilla. And I think his hands were maybe a couple of feet off the ground. And when he got to the back corner of my truck, the little one moved in behind the tailgate. So I never saw the little one again. But the little one moved in behind the tailgate and ducked down. And the big one stayed standing right there at the back corner of my truck. So I had a full view of him.
Dang.
And he had his hands on my ladder rack. I had a side post on the back of my ladder rack that he took his left hand and grabbed it. I could see his thumb pointing up when he grabbed it. So he had a thumb that was pointing up from a palm, and he grabbed the side post like that. And then the cross beam on the back of my ladder racks that was around the back of the truck where the little one had ducked down behind the tailgate, it grabbed that one with this hand, was out there off to the side. So and he was standing right at the back corner of my truck. I saw the moonlight coming through the hair on his shoulder. His shoulders looked like bowling balls. And I saw his lat muscles going down all the way to because he had kind of twisted a little bit to grab my side bar. And so I could see his lats, they attached way down on his hip. Like his back muscles must have been incredible. So I saw all this, and then he made a move that made me think he was coming down the driver's side. And so for a split second, I was in complete panic mode because my truck doors were not locked. I'm in my truck. I'm trying to stay hidden, and this thing is less than 10 feet away from me. Looks like he's heading in my direction down the driver's side of the truck. I went into panic mode. So I let my blankets close, and I tried to inch back behind my A post, even though the truck was totally dark and I had blankets up around the windows and it's nighttime. I still moved in behind my A post thinking I need it for protection. And I thought, even though I had the protection of the cab of my truck, there was still an element of panic there. And I'm a retired firefighter. At the time, I was in the middle of my firefighting career. I knew intense situations that through training and experiences on the job, nothing will prepare you for what your mind is going to put you through when you experience something like this. This thing was massive. He was so muscular. He stood next to my ladder racks, and the top of my ladder racks came to his clavicle right here. So he was looking over my ladder racks into my campsite. So I was able to measure my ladder racks the next day to get a size reference.
Right.
So when I measured my ladder racks, after I saw him standing there about right here, from the ground to the top of my ladder racks was 7 foot even.
Dang.
So he was neck and head taller than 7 foot. With shoulders that look like bowling balls. So you can
intimidating.
so you can understand the panic that I was going through, because I also didn't want him to know that I was in the cab of the truck. I wanted this to continue. I wanted it to play out. I had a camera in my hand, but I was so afraid. My plan was for them to eventually move around to the front of my truck, and I would just hit the headlights and film them through my windshield. So being that was my plan, I was willing to sit out everything else that happened. And because I was too afraid to open my door, there's no way I would have opened my door and put myself in that kind of harm without, maybe I would now with all of the knowledge that I've got now and all the experiences that I've had. But then it was just total fear and total terror. So you can just forget about opening my truck door. Even though I think I if it happened now, I would go ahead and open the door and try to hit them with the camera. But at the time, I just figured at some point, if they're curious, they're just going to keep working their way around my campsite, and we'll end up at the front of my truck at some point. And man, I'm going to light them up while I'm filming through the windshield.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's some other things that played out that night. They never left the back of my truck. As a matter of fact, they started rummaging through stuff that was in the back of my truck, and even swiped a couple of things out of the back of my truck.
Oh, dang.
And he was turning stuff over. I had containers back there and a generator and some other stuff. And he turned over the generator while he was just kind of rummaging through stuff in the back of my truck. So I just waited it out, and I listened to what was going on, and hoping that they would end up where I needed them to hit my headlights. But it never happened. It never happened. They eventually moved on, and I still sat there and waited, because I thought maybe if they go somewhere and hang out and still watch my campsite from a distance, I don't want them to see me getting out of my truck and all of a sudden checking things out and getting all excited. So I sat there quietly, hoping that they would come back. And I still hope that they would have come back and I could still do the headlight thing. I thought that was a solid plan. So I waited and I waited, and next thing you know, before you know it, sunlight was peeking through the trees and the morning light was coming. And that's the first time I got out was when morning light came around, and I was looking for hairs. I was looking for fingerprints. I actually found, well, part of the story was when I told you he was rummaging through stuff in the back of my truck, he got on my bumper. I mean, the whole ass end of my truck squatted like a toad when he got on there. So, but like I said, the details of everything that I'm telling you, I'm just giving you a very cursory story of what happened. If you want all the details, you're going to have to go check it out on my YouTube. Right. But I've got pictures there too. So, but the thing is, I saw 2 smudge marks on my bumper. And like I said, he had stepped on my bumper at one point, and because my whole truck squatted all the way down to where the springs were touching bottom. I mean, that's how heavy this thing was. Dang. And you could see the dirty foot marks on the far outsides of my bumper. So it was the big one, certainly the big one that was up there. And when he was rummaging through the stuff in the back of my truck, clearly, if I could see that that's where his feet were, then he was up leaning over the ladder racks. He was rummaging through stuff with his waist bent over my ladder racks.
Right. That's wild. So was that knocking you around on the inside of your truck when that was happening?
Well, when it climbed up on my truck, remember I told you it looked like he was making his way down the driver's side, and I went into panic mode. Mm-hmm. It was just a couple of seconds after that the whole ass end of my truck squatted down, so I knew that he was back there. But for a long while, I thought he was in the bed of my truck. I wasn't making a movement. I didn't want him to even know I was in the truck. So I even pulled my back off the seat. My heart was beating so hard, I pulled my back off the seat because I figured if he's touching the metal of my truck, he might even feel my heartbeat, you know? Right. And so I was doing everything I could to be incognito. And when I felt the back end of my truck squat down, at least for a split moment, I was comforted, not knowing that he wasn't coming down to look in my mirror or in my side window, that I knew where he was, which was at the back of my truck again. So when that happened, I knew he was back there. And so, but I thought he was in the bed of my truck. And there was a moment when I was hearing stuff being moved around in my truck. Now, most of this stuff I don't know until the next day, and I can look around and see what happened. But in my thought processes, I can only go with what I'm feeling, which was in sitting in total darkness and only having the things happen. So I thought he was in the bed of my truck. And again, I was like, holy crap. I mean, if he climbs on the cab of my truck, it is going to cave in. There's no way. And I actually reached down and put my hand on the key while I thought he was in the bed of my truck, because if I saw the top of my cab start to crinkle where he was going, I was going to start my truck. I was going to start my truck up and try to get the hell out of there with a Bigfoot in the back of my truck.
Yeah, that would have been something.
I know. But the thing is, I was able to wait it out, and it never happened. And eventually, he hopped off the truck, and when they were leaving, I heard the metal. What I thought was the metal posts being hit again. You remember on the little one's approach, he was hitting the little metal post. Well, there was a moment when they were digging through the stuff in the back of my truck that I had 2 little green propane tanks in the back corner of my truck. When they clanked those 2 together while they were moving stuff, all activity stopped. And I heard them going clank, 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 clank.
Dang.
Now, so after they left, I heard what I thought was that stick hitting the metal lantern post again, which I heard on its encroach
Like
on
they
his
were
approach,
communicating.
but it wasn't.
Huh.
They stole the 2 green tanks, and they were walking, and I think the little one must have took it because he's the one that ducked down behind the tailgate, and that's where the 2 tanks were.
Ah, that makes sense.
And so
Yep.
I heard that what I heard as they were leaving was those 2 tanks being clanked together.
That's crazy.
Isn't that wild?
And it's probably just the right size, for like a juvenile Bigfoot to grab,
Yeah, one
It's
in each hand, and he's probably like, "Hey, Dad, this makes the same sound as my stick hitting the lantern post."
yeah, exactly. That's man. Like how a bear is on its own, sometimes it's a 50-50 chance they might rush you or charge you, they might leave. But when a mother bear, I guess maybe even a father bear, but definitely when a mother bear has her cubs with her, she's 10 times as more protective. And
Right.
so I'm wondering if Bigfoot is a lot similar to that.
I don't know. I mean, all that I know about that park since then and talking to other people is you would think. I mean, I even read where somebody come out of the bathroom and got knocked over by one running by her. So I, you would think with that many people that go in and out of that park system and do camping and go to the bathroom at night, you'd think that there would be some kind of attacks or some type of aggression. Doesn't happen. So I don't know. I I think I probably could have got out of the truck. I think they would have froze because they were expecting somebody to be in the tent, not in the truck. So I think
Right.
they'd have been caught. I think they'd have been shocked to see me, hop out of the truck with my camera and a flashlight.
So you
But
had the tent set up too.
yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were just in your truck the whole time.
no,
Okay.
no, 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 no. I wasn't in my tent.
Right, but
I'm
you had
just
a tent set up.
Yeah, I had a tent set
Okay.
up, and
Okay.
that's where strategically when they come into the campsite, they put the truck between them and the tent. That and that's
Uh,
and that's smart. Uh,
right.
to have an object between where you think somebody's at.
Yep, that's smart. I mean, kind of like a decoy type deal. So
Yeah.
that's cool. Man, I would have freaked out. Like,
Oh yeah, I did. I did. I've been there. I've been there many times. 4 months later, believe me, I went back there all the time because my fire department schedule allowed me 4 days off every 2 weeks, and so I was going back down there, and I was trying all kinds of things. 4 months later, I did catch a game cam picture of what I believe is the young one in my campsite. I got 2 pictures. I hid a camera on a table with all of my camping supplies on the table, pointing towards some bait that was hanging on the lantern post. Well, he came in through to the campsite, low to the ground, and stuck his head up, and the camera caught him, and he was about this close to the camera. So I've got a round head that's washed out white. So it's all white, but it's very close to the camera. And you can see that it's got hair, no ears. You can't see any pointy ears. That rules out dog, cat, possum, raccoon, all that stuff. And then the second picture for me seals the deal. He stood up, so he come into the ground on low to the ground, and when his head broke the table line, the camera snapped a picture of his head, and then he stood on up and caught a picture of his shoulder and his armpit and his chest. And I've
and those
got
are on your YouTube.
Yeah, so if you go to my YouTube channel, which is the Sensible Bigfoot Project, it's my Chickasaw Park encounter, and
Okay,
I've got those pictures in there.
cool. I'd love to see 'em. I'll check it out sometime.
We
Uh,
also have a picture from a bluff not far from that campsite, caught at a different time, that I believe is the big male that was behind my truck, because he was up the hill looking through an opening. You could see a pointy head and huge shoulders. Like I was telling you, his
like the one
shoulders
we
were like
saw.
bowling balls.
That's crazy, man. That is just like you don't hear that every day. I mean, you don't hear that someone having that kind of encounter with that kind of description, especially as close as you were with them. And I've never heard of anyone going out like setting up a tent as a decoy and then just waiting. Like that's a really good strategy. Like I never would have thought, to do that. And the owl calls, that's really, I've heard there's a huge tie between Bigfoot and imitating an owl. So that also confirms, that story that I've heard before of them doing that.
Well, I mean, if any of your listeners go to my YouTube and go to my Chickasaw Park encounter, I'm going to show you the whole park. I'm going to show you the campsite where it happened. I'm going to show you diagrams of where I think it crossed the creek and all of the things that happened. And I'm going to show you the pictures. I believe I'm pretty accurate on the way I investigated this after the fact, because everything fits together. The interesting thing is there was a gentleman named Charles Hallmark, and you could probably find anything about him online if you want to, from Sulphur, Oklahoma. He was doing baiting techniques in those trash cans in the off seasons where he was putting baits in those trash cans. I was a recipient of that because they were in the park looking in those trash cans for baits that he had been doing previously.
Oh man, that's crazy. That just adds on, Like, did you know that there was bait in there?
I didn't know. No, there weren't at the time, but I did have a conversation with Dr. Charles Hallmark after the fact. I called him and I said, I understand that you had things happen in that park. I want to tell you what happened to me. And that's when I learned. I was actually at the fire department at the time when I called him, and he told me the experiments that he had done. Now, at the time I talked to him on the phone, he had been sick for a while, lost a lot of weight, and he eventually passed on from cancer. But at the time I spoke with him, he said, it's been 2 years since I've done my baitings in there, but I was getting their fingerprints on cups that I was putting in the trash cans, and I was getting their fingerprints. And so I was figuring out what baits they liked. And so that just confirmed to me that they were still 2 years later sending the young one over to go through and check the trash cans for the baits that he had been setting up for years.
That's pretty cool. Hey, we got a comment from Rich Boliski. Says he knows you. He wants to know how many encounters that you've had now with Bigfoot.
Well, we walked out. We've been involved for 7 years on a property in southern Missouri that has been incredible. We got as close as 7 or 8 foot away from a little one. Shane shined a light in its face while it was hiding in the brush. Man. And so we've had a lot of encounters like that, somewhat close. The encounter that I had at the Chickasaw Park, it's going to take a lot to make that the worst sighting that I've ever had, because so far nothing has even come close to that. And the thing is, the details that I was able to take in from that night, from all my fire department training, I knew. Plus, I've got some OCD issues, so I can't take that off the table. So with those two things combined, I was able to take information in for that whole night that things were happening, and catalog that, and use that for my future research to say, here's behaviors that I think they're doing. Can we get them to replicate that? But yeah, I mean, we've had lots of interesting stuff happen. There's no way this show could ever be long enough for me to lay out the details. I mean, we've got a handprint of a little one that was digging holes with a stick, and we found this. Shane found some 6-inch tracks leading to a hole being dug with sticks, and it put its hand down in the dirt that was dug out of the hole. So we casted the handprint, and it's a little bitty hand.
That's crazy. That's just, man. That's just out of this world. I mean, literally. Like, was there any? Did you get hair samples from that incident?
Well, believe me, I scoured my ladder racks for fingerprints. There were some dusty marks up there where it put its hand. That just tells me that at some point it had its hands on the ground. So there were dusty handprints, but not any oily fingerprints. And then there was those 2 dusty marks on the bumper where it put its feet on the outside of the bumper. So when it was moving, when it came from the wood line to the back corner of my truck, I told you it was stooped over with his arms swinging, and his arms were maybe a couple of feet off the ground. That tells me something that seems to always be prepared to go to the ground with its hands if it needs a burst of speed, and stay low to get out of an area.
Man, that's ooh. That's crazy. Ugh. I would have freaked out either way. I mean, I had
Yeah,
a
I've got to tell you, from when that happened in 2006, I was fully on board with, you know what, these things are just some type of animal. It looked like a gorilla, so to me, it had to be a gorilla or an ape. And so my thought processes throughout the processes after that were trying to out trick them, outmaneuver them, thinking about them as an animal. But I'm telling you, especially with the experiences we've had for the last 7 years at the 400, which we're dealing with a family unit there, it has been so incredible knowing how these things work together, nonverbal communications. All I can say is they have got to be some type of human. They are incredibly intelligent. They
Mhm.
use so much tactics when they are moving around at night, nonverbal. I don't know if they're using hand signals or not, but I know they're using a lot of rock clacks and tree knocks and whistles. I've got some whistles recorded where one is whistling. I've even got a bluff charge recorded that was quite shocking. And if it's on my website, it's called the bluff charge. So you might want to check that out too.
What's your YouTube again, just for in case people are just tuning in?
It's called the Sensible Bigfoot Project.
Cool.
I've always tried to just use logic. I mean, you've got to agree with me. This arena is full of people that will just go anywhere and everywhere with the information. And I'm trying to keep it back to where it's just straight logic. There's no portals, there's no mind speak, there's there's none of this what I call just, I don't know, people letting their minds go a little crazy on some of these issues and never experienced that. And you would think, as close as we've been to some of these, even the little ones, that we would experience some of this phenomena that people are reporting. So I don't know what to say about. I'm not saying anyone's lying, but I'm saying I know what it is to let your fear get the better of you. And sometimes in a fearful state, you're going to take things in a little differently than logically.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. There is a podcast, YouTube channel called, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called The Confessionals, or it might just be called Confessionals. Um, One of my fans reached out to me last week and sent me a link. I'll send it to you after the show. But basically, this was based in Tennessee, and these two police officers were on this hunting trip and they were camping, and they encountered what they always considered to be the hairy man, Bigfoot. They said whatever you want to call it. But their version of the way it looked, and they actually have a sketch they made. Now, it's a 2 hour episode, so make sure you have some time to listen. But it's very long, drawn out, and detailed. And when I listened to the way he told this story and the sketch that he had, it was just like, to me, it sounded more like a werewolf dogman type thing. But he said it acted like Bigfoot, chunked rocks at him, did all this stuff, but it's had the red glowing eyes and everything. But he just said that it had pointy ears, like a wolf. It had a snout like a wolf. It was like 8 feet tall, something like that, and it grinned at him. And it just like paralyzed the dude in fear. Him and his buddy were both sheriff deputies in Arkansas at the time that they were both deputies, either in Tennessee or in Arkansas at the time this happened. But maybe they were just going up there for a camping trip. I don't know. But if you get time, check that episode out. It's called Terror in the LBL, but I'll definitely send you a link to it. But it kind
Well,
of reminds me of just that
I mean,
experience.
I can tell you that I don't put a whole lot of faith in what a lot of people tell me, especially online, because a lot of people are looking for attention. A lot of people are looking for, hits and likes and subscribers and things like that. The irony of it is, I expect you to believe me because I say, hey, I'm being honest, but that's just me saying that.
Right.
But the ironic thing is, I hardly believe anyone else because I know how susceptible people are to fakery, to changing. They'll speak for what they think people want to hear. I was out with a group of people one time, and I had one guy who dropped to his knee and said he was zapped right in front of me, and I'm just like, are you kidding me? So people will say things and do things for the attention, and it's hard for me to. just think back 50 years ago when you had your basic four horse of the apocalypse, the four horsemen of Bigfootery, whether it would be Bob Gimlin and Grover Krantz and all of those type of guys. Not once did you ever hear a dog man story. No dog man. None of that makes any sense. But all of a sudden, in the past 10 years, a couple of people are like, oh yeah, dog man. Now everybody says dog man. So it's almost like a group mentality thing where you just go with the flow and say what you think people want to hear, and let's make it super exciting. And I just don't buy it. I've never seen it. I've only seen one type of thing going on out there, and you would think as many times as we've been out there and as close as we've gotten, we would experience what some of these people are saying. But I'm telling you, so far, it's just been a physical specimen with unbelievable abilities, and they work together almost like nighttime military operations, which we have honed to a skill when it comes to our military out doing night ops.
Right.
These things behave the same way, where they keep themselves like triangulate. They'll triangulate around things that are happening, and so that you've always got one of their family members positioned to subterfuge or provide a diversion. If one of them gets in a bind, all of a sudden you'll hear a branch break to your left or right, and if you look over, then the other one's gone. That's how many times do you have to hear that happening to know that they're setting things up that way? And for them to set things up that way means they pre-plan it.
It's tactical too. They're very tactical the way they move and the way they communicate and orchestrate. Yeah, absolutely. And they're like masters of the forest, is what I think. But yeah, definitely.
When Shane walked out to that little one, we were amazed at that whole process. Shane was able to get out there as close as he did to it, and when he finally stepped around to try to look at the body where it was laying prone on the ground, that's when it started clicking its teeth, or at least that's the sound Shane said it sounded like. Its teeth were clicking, and that's when a rock came flying in from about 40 or 50 feet away. That a rock almost hit Shane in the leg, and so he backtracked out back to the trail where we were standing. And come to find out, in the next day's investigation, we find the 12-inch tracks and the other siblings' tracks back in that wood line where the rock came from. So that means Mom was standing there the whole time and allowed him to walk up to that little one laying in the grass. So the mother was the key. What would she allow? These seems to be a matriarch family where the father is on the perimeter of this property. That's where his prints are always seems to be found, maybe guarding the border of this perimeter of this property. And hers are the ones that are always with the juveniles. So it's almost like it's a matriarch type family dynamic where she does all the training. She's always with the juveniles. And it was just fascinating to uncover these details from what happens to us, as to what we expect there. But it's the mother that has allowed to allow Shane to get that close. We have to say, whatever demeanor the mother has, if she's accepted us as being something that's non-dangerous, then that's how the success of us interacting with these youngsters is based on whether the mother can trust us.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, they definitely have a plan, like a day watcher, someone that watches during the day to, keep from notifying everybody or whatever if someone's coming or they need to get out of the area. Yeah, like there's that tactical strategy there. And
yeah, I mean, they're so adept at nonverbal communications, whether it be rock clacks or tree knocking or even whistles or at least in my case at the Chickasaw Park, for a short while, it was mimicking an owl. So I can't put off the table that they're not mimicking other animal sounds, at least because it happened for me that night. So with all of these nonverbal communications, I mean, unless you call animal mimicry a verbal, all of these nonverbals tells me that they don't have a home. They don't live in a cave. They don't live somewhere specific. They mainly, I think are opportunistic nappers. Sometimes they will burrow into a briar thicket or something like that, something that will afford them some type of cover. But I don't think, because we hear so many tree knocks, then clearly even during the day when we hear knocks, somebody's up. Somebody's paying attention to what we're doing, and they're using a tree knock. That means there's at least one more around, because you're not doing a tree knock for yourself. You're doing a tree knock to alert somebody else. So that tells me that there's open communication across the tops of these ridges and hollers, that they're keeping everybody alert to what's going on when it comes to our activity. And that tells me that they stay in the open. And I think you can take that to the bank, that they're not going to put themselves in a cave that allows themselves to get caught. And first of all, most people, they must have ideas of caves being these glamorous, wide open things that you can drive your vehicle into. That is not what your typical cave looks like. Your typical cave looks like a hole that you've got to shimmy and shake and drag yourself through some mud to get into it. That's what most caves look like. These things are not that dumb where they're going to get themselves in a position where they're going to be holed up in a cave and can easily be. And then people will say, well, all these caves are connected. I mean, people are just not. I don't think they're being very smart when they throw those out there as like it's some kind of fact.
Right.
But what is a fact is how intelligent these things are. So I don't think that they're going to allow themselves to be possibly holed up like that. But yeah, I think they're just out in the open. They nap wherever they need to. I mean, I've read reports where hunters are walking across the field and one pops up early in the morning and takes off running, which means it was probably taking a nap.
Right.
So that tells me that that's probably more typical behavior, and that's why we hear so many wood knocks even throughout the day, is that they're awake. They sleep in different places wherever they need to, and then they just have a sentinel that his job is to keep his eye on the area and lets them know through whatever communications they've decided.
Yeah, I agree. And I personally think they migrate in the winter and summer, but because that's just me. I think we get because I've heard knocks before. We live in the country. We don't have neighbors. I've only had one what I believe to be a Bigfoot encounter, just because of the tracks I saw. That and the amount of fear that I felt of adrenaline. My hair stood on end. The grunt that I heard and the way that it tore through the forest and the tracks is the only thing that leads me to believe that it's some kind of animal like that. And I've never experienced anything like that before. I don't know if I was ever calling it in, because me and my wife, because I was a huge skeptic at first when, like back in 2000, I would say 21, we started getting into Bigfoot and researching. And, I would do tree knocks. We have these giant cedar trees out here, and I would never hear anything back till one night I did 3 knocks, just 1, 2, 3. And about 5 seconds later, we were just not expecting anything. I was going back to hit the tree again, and I heard 4 knocks, the same speed that I hit it. But it sounded like it was coming from at least half a mile, like to our south. And I'm like, we have no neighbors there. We own 180 acres almost. I had no sense of, like, I couldn't make sense of it until maybe I have this on my YouTube as well. It was April 29th, 2023. We were hearing these knocks like at 7 p.m. and sun was still up. Almost a year ago, a year and a day ago, exactly. We heard these knocks, and my wife's like, "Do you hear that?" I was like, "Yeah, I heard that." So I had to find out what was making these knocks, and so I just grabbed my rifle, and she starts banging on this tree, and she'll stop and wait, and then it was doing it back, and so I was just like, "Keep doing that," and so I just followed the sounds of the tree knocks, and I finally got to this little valley, all covered in trees, and I was like, "Hey, you're trespassing." I thought it was just a person, just a deer maybe hitting its antlers against the tree, something. And so I was like, "You can't be out here. You're trespassing. If you do not leave, you will be shot, because this is our property, and we have the right to stand our ground." And so after I said that, because I said it in a really like authoritative voice or whatever. I heard this giant just grunt, and it was just a grunt that was like went through my chest, and I was like, what on earth? And my adrenaline started kicking up. Hair was on the top of my on standing on end, and it just branches were breaking, and I could just feel it darting off. I didn't see it, but I just saw branches moving. My wife said she saw two trees just shaking, and it just was gone. And so after it was gone, and I kind of calmed down a little bit, I found my wife, and I was like making sure she was okay. I went down in that valley where there is a natural spring right there. Um, I saw these I put my foot up next to it. I have a 12 size boot, and I put my boot up next to it, and it was about 2 to 3 inches bigger than mine. I didn't measure it because I was just like, it's way bigger than mine. I took a picture of it, and I think I have that on the video at the very end. But there was this tall, luscious green grass by the creek valley area, and the tracks went all the way up until the underpass of the turnpike. And so I'm like, what on earth was that? Like, I have no idea other than to believe that it was some kind of Bigfoot or something just because the tracks were so big and what I felt. I've never been in any kind of confrontation to where I've had that kind of fear before. And so I was just like, man. And that's kind of what made me start kind of doing this type stuff is I want to hear everyone else's encounters and,
Well, I talked to a lady one time who caught one in her barn. She opened up the door and she said it was standing there elbow deep in a barrel of sweet horse molasses feed, sweet feed that they give horses. And I guess it's kind of mixed with molasses or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she said it was elbow deep in a barrel, and it was looking at her with a shocked look on its face, and it turned and dove through an opening in the side of the barn. I think it was a window with no glass that it just dove through. And so I've always kept that in the back of my head because I've always formulated that these things may make a circuit. I don't think that they migrate, but I think they make a circuit in whatever areas they live in. They know what barn they can get a few handfuls of sweet molasses feed. They know what barn has a bunch of rabbit hutches where they can get a rabbit now and again. They know which places have chicken coops where they can occasionally get a chicken coop and some eggs. And they've learned not to deplete. They're smart enough. We've already talked about their intelligence level. So we need to transfer that over to how intelligent they are in all aspects of their living. They've learned to make these rounds and take little things of what they need. And we will keep replenishing them. We'll keep filling that barrel up with the sweet feed because we don't know it's being taken only a few handfuls at a time.
Right. They know not to take too much to get caught. They just stay under the radar. And that's what they're good at. It's what, they might have been here before us. We don't know, so, right. But yeah, it's wild how stealthy they are for sure.
Yeah. And I hate to make you need to draw this to a close, but I've got a 9 o'clock meeting tonight that I've got to get to on Zoom.
Absolutely. Randy, I appreciate having you on the show, and thank you very much for your story. And I'll be sure to check out your YouTube, and guys, be sure to check out Randy's YouTube. What was it called again?
The Sensible Bigfoot Project.
All right, Sensible Bigfoot Project. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Randy, for being on the show, and we will talk to you later. Hey, guys, thanks a lot for being on the show at The Story with Rory. Thanks for having you.